Alright, so hey everyone, today I want to take a look at the Deadzones for the Rollin Rascal demo. This is being demonstrated on PC, and I tested this with an Xbox controller. It seems the same with PlayStation controllers, but there are some differences in some PC games, so that's something to be aware of. But for this, we have about 20% sort of bloated square Deadzone. At least that's what I've been calling it. This Deadzone is created by having an underlying radial Deadzone and then an axial Deadzone on top of it. And the axial portion sort of either squares the circle or the circular portion sort of bloats the square shape. But you can see in the corners that requires a bit more input before movement begins. And because of the axial portion of the Deadzone, this limits diagonal movement around the axes. So if you move within these blue regions, you'll be moving in one of four directions. So in this case, perfectly forward, perfectly backward, perfectly to the left, and perfectly to the right. You only start seeing diagonal movement once you break out of both axis Deadzones, represented by this green region. Sort of importantly, it appears that this axial Deadzone is not scaled, meaning that there will be an abrupt transition from, say in this case, forward movement to diagonal movement. You can see that's a pretty hard pivot, and any diagonals within this range are lost. So at full tilt, this isn't a lot, but you can see, especially with the camera following, let's line up a little better, that this is a pretty harsh transition. And because of the axial Deadzone, this ends up being the most restricted right around the Deadzone. And because it's unscaled, this can result in the most dramatic diagonal pivots. See, perfectly forward, diagonal, perfectly left. And that's one of the first things I'd like to see improved is scaling this Deadzone properly so you don't lose any angles with this. That'll be beneficial to make subtle diagonals easier, because not only are you losing the angles within this axial Deadzone, but because the camera following, that's the system that automatically moves the camera when you're moving horizontally. You can see that I'm not moving the right stick, but the camera is rotating. When you move outside of this axial Deadzone, you're moving at a more abrupt angle, and the camera following will be a little stronger because of that. So in this case, you might want to make a smaller adjustment, but because it's unscaled, this may be more abrupt than you want and may kind of create some snaking the faster you move. Additionally, while I think in this case, the axial Deadzone is fine since you're going to be pushing the stick fully, I think it'd be better to have sort of an angular restriction method than an axial Deadzone, just because it would make it so that the level of restriction is the same at full tilts as well as small tilts, because right now your small movements are the most restricted and your full tilts are the least. And it'd be nice to see an option to control that level of restriction. So some players who want more angular restriction can have it, and some players who want less or no angular restriction can access that as well. But for the camera, we have about a 30% radial dead zone. And there's no restriction here, so I can bob right around the axis, and you can see subtle diagonal movement is occurring. And same with the horizontal axis. If we look at the acceleration curve, we can see that it starts at over 20% of your total turn speed, and then increases linearly the rest of the way. And this is for the same exact reason as the movement. There's an underlying about 12.5% radial dead zone, and that's the same for the movement. But in this case, they're adding another radial dead zone on top of that, and that's unscaled, so that's eating the beginning portion of the curve. So it's the same thing that's happening with the angles for the axial dead zone, but for the curve. So I think in this case, an improvement here would be to, well, you can just remove the underlying radial dead zones, but mostly importantly is scaling the input to this radial dead zone, so you can start at 1% or your slowest movement speed and just have a smooth linear curve for the entirety of this, because this makes it so that if you want to make small adjustments, you actually can't. You have to start at 20% of your speed. And I'm playing at the default sensitivity, so the sensitivity is quite low, but certainly at faster movement speeds, this can be pretty jarring. So having that smoothed out would definitely be an improvement. So I think that about covers it for the dead zones. However, I'd also like to comment on, or at least request some improvements for the general camera as well, or the camera following. So the camera following, again, is how the camera automatically follows the character to try to keep their back. And this happens horizontally, and that's perfectly fine. But it doesn't happen vertically, so you can see that I can move around and the camera remains fixed vertically wherever I leave it. So this is pointing straight down, and if I point as high as possible, you can see that it just stays there. I think one of the nicest quality of life improvements between, say, Spark the Electric Jester 2 to 3 was that it corrected it added vertical camera following, or at least made it much more aggressive than 2, so that whenever you started moving quickly, it would autocorrect to a pretty comfortable elevation. And it'd be nice to see that here as well. And perhaps with options to control if either camera following is active for both the horizontal and vertical movements, and maybe even a slider to control the intensity of that. Additionally, the camera following can take over control when you're moving with the right stick, so you can see that I'm moving kind of as slow as possible with the right stick, but the camera following took over and completely negated the horizontal movement. And if I do this again, it'll just be a bit before it takes control back, or specifically away from you. And the only way to maintain player control of the camera is actually to keep moving. And you can recenter the camera behind you. However, when you're moving, say, quick, I'm clicking the stick and it's not centering behind me until you actually slow down. I think it'd be ideal if the player was actively moving the camera, that the camera following turns off, so that the player has control of the camera when they want it, and when they aren't moving the right stick, then the camera following has full control. But that really covers things. So Some of the requested improvements is one, scale the axial dead zone so that you don't lose angles, and this will make making subtle adjustments easier because you'll have those subtle angles to work with and the camera following won't be as aggressive. Perhaps change the implementation to make this so that this only affects the angle and is restricted in an angular instead of an axial fashion. For the camera, scale the input around the radial dead zone so you don't lose anything. And then make the camera following disable whenever the player is manually moving the right stick. But otherwise, that about covers things. So, of course, this game itself, plays quite well. It's just, I think these few control tweaks would make it play that much better. But that's it for me, so thanks for watching, and everyone, have a great rest of your day.